So, all right. Again, my name is Chris Smallcomb with the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Reno. We're located across from TNCC, and we do the forecasting warnings for the western third of Nevada and the eastern Sierra, including, of course, the Carson River watershed. So, my presentation is going to focus on the spring and summer outlook after the very interesting winter that we've had so far. Let's move ahead here. And there I am giving one of my infamous or famous briefings using the magic 8-ball, if you can see it close enough. So just keep it real, it is in the office, we do use it sometimes. All right, so of course we had an exceptionally wet October and December, just amazing start to the winter and the water year, and then of course in January through March, just shut down. And I've been in Reno for 15 years, worked in the weather service for 22. I've never seen the weather just flip on a dime like that. Just fundamental wholesale pattern shift and just stop, just like that. You know, New Year's Day, we think we're doing great, no worries this year, and then January through March happens. So the time for our big storms is running out. We can still get decent storms into April, and many of you know that it's probably a little bit unwise to plan your Lake Tahoe vacation around Memorial Day weekend because we usually have something unpleasant happen around then weather-wise. So we can still get some stuff, but the time is running out. So what does spring and summer have in store? So where do we stand for the end of winter? This is our snow water equivalent chart for the Carson River Basin using the NRCS SNOTEL sites up in the mountains. The shading is kind of the range of possibilities based on historical data, roughly 40 or so years of a period of record. The green line is what is normal. The black line is what happened this year. So some really stark changes to our fortunes this year. First up is that storm that we had in October, right at the end of October. At the Reno Climate Station, we had nearly 3 inches of rain at the airport, which is 40% of the annual average rainfall in one storm. We even had, where I live over in Sparks, usually we're a little bit drier, we also had 3 inches of rain. And it was just enough rain to find that one little gap in the chimney and find its way into the house. You know, so it's storms like this that test your roofing system. And I imagine the roofers are doing pretty well after that. So then we dried out. We had the second warmest November on record, at least at the Reno station. The records were back to 1893. So I reference that site a lot because it has the longest period of record in the region. Only 0.11 of an inch of precip, but that's actually, you know, not entirely abnormal. The big winter of 2016-17, we actually also had a very dry, mild November. Going into December, boom, just the storm door was wide open, cold Alaskan type storms coming in with a little bit of atmospheric river moisture for good measure. Up at the Central Sierra Snow Lab, it was the third snowiest month of any month on record back to 1970 up at Donner Pass. Looked at some of the snowtells in the Carson Basin, and for 40 years of record, this is a top 3 snowiest for many of them in terms of snow water gains. And then just it stopped. You know, I think at that point we were all hoping for a break, right? You know, to kind of take it easy, maybe go enjoy some of that snow. You know, we're thinking the usual January break of like maybe a few weeks, not 8-10 week type deal, and that's sort of what happened. In fact, there was a 55-day streak in the Eastern Sierra where we had no snow water equivalent gains. It either was level or it even decreased ever so slightly. And so that was a record if you go back to 1981. And was the peak snow water content actually on February 25th? Yeah, it probably will have been unless we have some wild event in the next few weeks. But normally everybody thinks, oh, April 1st, that's when the peak snowpack is. Well, you know, it's getting earlier and earlier now. We didn't think it'd be this early this year, and then dry start to a calendar year for Tahoe City Minutes. So here are my 2 kids, Savannah and Carson. This is a few months ago. I put this on my Instagram when we thought in November the drought was roaring back, but I saved it for this occasion because drought seems to be roaring back in the actual winter. Carson, he's being left behind way in the background as Savannah races away. So drought seems to be gaining steam. This is a graph showing you the precipitation amounts for various climate sites in the region for each month. So orange is October, yellow is November, green is December, January really doesn't even exist, and then February is blue there. So you just see how boom or bust it was this past winter. So if you look at the precipitation percentiles dating back to 1895, January through February, so the 2 months, two very dry months, are record dries across a good chunk of California and Nevada. But if you look at the winter as a whole, check this out. Actually, since October, we're actually still in kind of a wet anomaly in a good chunk of western Nevada here. That's all that October storm. That's just that one storm because there was no rain shadow with that storm. It just spilled right on over. And so that's why the anomaly relative to normal is really big in the normally rain shadowed parts of Nevada. So looking at the SNOTEL data for the mountain sites, obviously October and December stand out with way, way above percent of normal precipitation, 400, 500% of normal in some cases. And then you have the exact opposites for the other months, way, way below 100% of normal for those months. So what happened? It's all about where the ridge of high pressure sets up. And this is a schematic that I was remote working from the coffee shop. So I'm like, well, let me just draw something up on the iPad and see if it sticks. Well, I've used it a few times so far, so I guess it has some staying power. So where the ridge of high pressure sits right over us, that's where it's dry, no wind. We had plenty of those days in January and February, but we actually had more days where that ridge was just offshore. It was parked right here. It was enough to block the storms from hitting us from the west coast, those nice moisture-laden storms, just like your Star Trek, your shields are up, and everything's kind of going around way up into Canada. But what it did is that the flow pattern allowed some cool air to dive into the Great Basin. So while we were very dry, we actually weren't that warm. We were actually near or even below normal overall for temperature, just because that ridge was parked just offshore, and it kind of opened the doors to those cooler little dry cold fronts that would come in periodically. So the good and not so good. Here's Carson doing his best Drake impression out on the trails. This is near Hidden Valley. So the good news first, there is some good news. And one thing is an October storm. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Is our soils are actually relatively wet compared to normal. And it's a huge difference in the last 2 years. So we have wet soil. So what snowpack we do have won't just automatically go into a dry sponge parched soil environment like it did the last couple of years. It'll actually have a better runoff efficiency. So what little snowpack we do have, it would be better runoff efficiency. And actually the observed flows to date in the region have been still a little below normal, but not too far off in terms of the water that we've seen already come down the river systems. Now, of course, the bad news, and there's a lot of it, we're only at 56% of median snowpack right now in the Carson River Basin, and it's dropping fast. That graph I showed you earlier was about 67% normal. That was taken last week. So you can see how rapidly it's dropping. Well, temperatures in the 80s will do that to you. We had that 55-day dry streak in the middle of winter, and then our water supply outlooks that I'll touch on in the presentation are dropping dramatically. These are the latest ones from the California Nevada River Forecast Center, which is part of the Weather Service. They run models every day based on the snowpack plus the forecasted weather weeks and months in advance. And as getting into La Junte, 20% of normal water is forecast to make it to La Junte this melt season. So this is the snowpack graph that I've shown you before. You notice how even a week ago we were at 67%. Now this is before the big drop that we saw because of the warm temperatures. This is just some context for some different years. Probably be a little hard to see from the back, but when you can take a look at the YouTube later. But here's 2020. This one here, we had a big March in 2020. And then 2013. 2013 has actually kind of been our analog so far. It actually was also very busy early on, and then it flatlined in January, February, and into March. So right now, that if you're looking for an analog year, that might be the one to use. Of course, the spring, the rest of spring weather will determine ultimately what we see out of that. Now, aspect is everything right now, and this is really neat data from the airborne snow observatories. They ran their flights over the Carson and Truckee River basins on March 11th. They're scheduled to do another one around April 1st, and they're actually mapping all the snowpack, not just where the SNOTEL sites are. And what's neat about this graph, it shows you where all the snow is confined to is the north, northeast, and even the east aspects. The south aspects, you can just look out the window. There's a huge difference in the snow cover, a lot less. When I go out running on the trails, it's all about the south aspects as much as possible, so I don't have to deal with snow. So one thing this can do is a lot of the SNOTEL sites typically are in this north aspect or more sheltered areas. So the SNOTEL data alone can give you maybe a little too rosy, if you will, of a picture. So the water supply models do try to factor that into account. So here's the weather outlook. This I stole from something that they always say in Minnesota. Basically, every storm looks amazing on day 5 days out, and then as you get closer and closer and closer, it's like, oh, never mind. That seems to happen here with some regularity as well. All right. So the real question on everybody's mind, are we looking at some Bob Ross nice little storms coming up that might help us out, or at least keep it from getting worse? Or are we going to get maybe some liquid range? These are honestly some energy drinks I saw at Cost Plus World Market. It's like, I got to take a picture of this and then somehow figure out how to put it into a talk. Here you go. There you go. All right. So atmospheric rivers. Those are the big ones. That's what we like. That's what we need to really improve our water supply prospects. Typically, we get more than 50% of our annual total snowpack and water supply out of just a handful of these storms. Sometimes as few as 5, maybe 10 ARs each winter that give us the majority of our precipitation. Of course, we haven't had all that many. And so what this chart here shows you is the probability of seeing an atmospheric river make landfall at various latitudes going into the future. And of course, your eyes gaze right here. What's that? Ooh, that's kind of our latitude there, right around April 5th. Ooh, okay. Well, here we go. We've had atmospheric rivers on April 5th. I know of one 4 years ago when my son was born. So conveniently on an atmospheric river day. But so like, okay, maybe there's some prospects there. Well, direction is everything. Direction of travel with atmospheric rivers is anything. You need the atmospheric river to slam into the Sierra at a perpendicular direction to really squeeze out all that moisture, squeeze that sponge out and get as much out as you can. When it comes to the Northwest, it's not able to use the terrains optimally to squeeze out that moisture. So honestly, we could get some light precipitation out of that, but it's going to be one of those days where you're going to be looking up and it's going to be just overcast clouds. You're going to wait a minute. You're supposed to be down here. All that moisture is up there. It's supposed to be down here. So unfortunately, nothing good of that. So looking at the actual models themselves, this is over the next, say, 10 days or so. What is the chance of getting a ½ inch of water equivalent? And what's the chance of getting 2 inches of water equivalent? Well, the 2 inches, if anything meaningful, forget about it. The ½ inch even, most of that plot there was in the last 24 hours. So some of us got some little bit of rain, but not a whole lot. So really, it's not looking all that good for additional storms in the next say 10 to 14 days. I'm sure this is the anomaly on precipitation. So at least for the next 2 weeks, favoring drier than normal conditions. Temperature-wise, this is where things are changing. We are starting to warm up. We're starting to see those warmer days show up in our models and warmer than normal. So this is looking at every day 0 through 7 and then 8 through 15 temperature anomalies from one of our models. And basically showing you warmer than normal. The period to watch is on this April 4th through the 11th. So in Nevada, it's kind of right in the middle there. So it's near normal, but look at the Sierra. Look at that warm anomaly in the Sierra. So that's something that we're going to keep an eye on for perhaps peak snowmelt flows. Because in that one, some of our models are showing close to 85 to 90 temperatures here in the valleys around April 10th or so. So if that happens, we're definitely going to see some big snowmelt flows. So going through the rest of April, right now, through about the 22nd, leaning below normal on precipitation and kind of a lean above normal on temperature. So this is this week 3, week 4 outlook. This is where we look for really big, robust signals in the models. It's like you turn really wet, really dry, like ahead of the October storm. That one we saw coming 3 weeks out. This thing had a giant green blob over us, showing you a heavy favorite for above normal precip. So we're not seeing those signals now, so don't automatically write off any storms in mid-April. It's just that the signal isn't super strong this far out for anything really, really big at this point. Now, here's spring. This doesn't look too good. This is April, May, and June combined. So when we do our seasonal outlooks, we do them in 3-month blocks because this is the skill of the models isn't good enough to go month by month by month by month. It's just not that good. There's a great saying about seasonal weather outlooks is they're too good to ignore, but not good enough to use. So take that for what it's worth. But that being said, I think a great way of looking at this is pie charts for our area, there's definitely a heavy favoring for below normal precipitation for that 3-month period, but of course you can't discount near or above normal either, just based on a probabilistic sense. So if you're betting, you're probably going to go below normal, but you can't rule out the other scenarios either at this point. So summer, this is when we start talking monsoon, thunderstorms, all that jazz. And right now it's equal chances on the precipitation, but the temperature, look at that temperature. I think last year we set a record for the number of 100-degree days in Reno, so over 20. Like that's not, I think the long-term average is 7. So we were at 20, and that included the smoke days. The smoke, if anything, actually kept us cooler on a few of the days, as horrible as it was. So we would have had even more if we hadn't had all that smoke. The precipitation is interesting because an equal chances does open the door to us having a near normal or even above normal number of thunderstorm days. I know in the basin, flash flooding is a concern. Johnson Lane, the recent burn areas like the Tamarack. So that's something we're going to have to keep our eyes on as we head into late June, July, into August, so those monsoon storms. So this outlook does open the door to us having a near normal or even a busier than average thunderstorm season this coming summer. So the water supply forecasts, as you might imagine, are fairly dire for the area. These are the snow melt coming April through July. And in the upper parts of the basin, about 35 to 40% of normal, and then down toward Carson City and going into LaHunt, 20 to 22% of normal. That's the latest California Nevada River Forecast Center outlook. And then this is the trend line. This is where I said around the forecast on New Year's Day, it's looking really prime. It was, let's turn over here. It was way above the mean even. And then our dry months, just everything just kept going down and down and down. So that's these models, these water supply models typically don't show skill until you get to about mid to late February. Because then you've had enough of your winter, not the whole thing, but enough of it that you can really start making some intelligent decisions based on what's happened and what the weather forecast is. There is the total, the April through July flows on the Carson River, Carson City, that red bar is what we're projecting for this year. And then you can see the median there is that dashed line. So this will be the 3rd year in a row of below median flows. Drought, of course, drought is here. It's probably gonna get worse. Right now we're in, one more here. We're in that D2, which is the middle severe drought here, but there's some discussions about upgrading it to D3 on some subsequent drought, just because of the really low stream flow forecast and the fact that we really haven't had any meaningful storms, and there's really nothing projected for the coming weeks. I think the only mitigating factor is that soil moisture is that is above normal still to this point. So with that said, it's a segue on fire season. Now there hasn't been like an official, here's the official fire season forecast. So you're going to hear Chris's interpretation of the fire season forecast. So we got 2 competing factors here. One is all the state is in drought, and some parts of the state are in way worse shape than others. And then this is the same map I showed you earlier. There's parts of our area that have still, to this date, have above normal precipitation. Most of that rainfall, not as much snow. We're not talking snowpack, we're just talking about rainfall. So long-term drought does tend to limit new growth. So all that, the grass crop, which a lot of Nevada fires tend to rely on that small vegetation, the grasses to grow until it carries fire from year to year to year. So drought does tend to limit that. So we actually often see some of our lower activity fire years during peak drought periods in Nevada, just because it doesn't have that fuel, that small vegetation to carry the fires. But at the same time, the fact that we're in the 3rd year of a significant drought, it continues to stress the larger vegetation that lives from year to year to year. So the timber, the pinyon juniper, the sage, especially in southern Nevada, but it's true also up here. Now, the fact that we did have that really big October storm and the soil moistures are above normal would tend to counter some of that drought signal in terms of increasing the grass growth. And I run enough of the trails around the region that I see there's plenty of stuff growing. In fact, the wildflowers are quite nice right now. So basically at this point, I think we probably should plan on a busier fire season in Nevada compared to the past couple of years. Past couple of years have been driven all by the long-term droughts limiting that grass crop. But the fact that we had a really wet October and December probably is going to increase the grass crop. No guarantees. Of course, it'll depend on the spring weather. But and then the Sierra. Honestly, I think everything was really good until New Year's. I was like, oh wow, okay, no more Caldor fires, right? Any more of that? I'll be honest, I don't know anymore. I mean, the snowpack is pretty sad. So we'll have to see how that goes. We'll hope for the best. All right. So speaking of that post-fire flooding, we'll touch on this and then I'll wrap it up. This is something we'll have to deal with in the next few years. So the Tamarack fire, the Caldor fire. These are where the soils become hydrophobic and you get these really intense rainfalls, especially during summer with thunderstorms, and runoff and debris flows and flash floods happen very rapidly, often in a matter of just minutes of that heavy rainfall. So these are called debris flows. These are some pictures from near Topaz and the Monitor Pass and some recent fires. And so, you know, the challenges of this is radar coverage. Weather radar coverage gets pretty spartan outside down toward the Bishop and other areas of the Eastern Sierra. For the Carson River Basin, it's actually not too bad in general. We also do have the ability to deploy targeted weather stations on these burn areas. So that sends us instantaneous rainfall information to be able to issue hopefully more timely warnings. But when things happen on a matter of 5 or 10 minutes, it's kind of hard to get a heads up warning out to the public. So this is where, you know, community outreach is well ahead of these thunderstorm days to indicate, okay, there's an increased risk of this type of hazard occurring. And if it starts raining, then take action. Don't wait for some official warning to come. So, of course, the Tamarack and the Caldor fires in the immediate region, these are some analyses from multi-agency analysis that show you the risk of debris flow. So this is Markleyville here and west of Markleyville, not in a good situation if we were to have one of those heavy rainfall situations. And then just west of Highway 395 there, just west of Holbrook Junction, that's another area that we're concerned with, the steep terrain that sits above all those homes that can flood quite rapidly. So I'll wrap up with this. This is a new tool that we're using is instead of just giving you one river forecast, this is for the Carson River at Woodford's, is we're actually able to give you what's called an ensemble of river forecasts, where we basically run many different weather simulations with slightly different weather conditions to give you a range of possibilities, possible outcomes. So that's what you're seeing here. The black line is the old school, hey, just give me a forecast, give me one number kind of thing. And then the shading is indicating the range of possibilities there. So this is an example I screen captured yesterday showing you the snowmelt flows from the Carson at Woodford. So you can see the diurnal cycles to that. So that's what I got, kind of a potpourri of things. This is actually a picture I took near Genoa on October 26th. Just after that, they got the Surf River. And man, so like, oh man, I mean, at that point, we were freaking out about flooding in terms of like, man, if we have another one of these, we're in trouble. I mean, the ground is saturated. We already have this, but thankfully, at least flooding wise, we didn't have that major flood deal this year like we could have had in 2017. So that's what I got. Thanks for your attention, and we'll prepare for what's to come and hope for the best. It was great. So, thank you.